look at the rockets from SpaceX, they come back to Earth, which is a big accomplishment. But the fundamental design, the base design, still looks the same as like rockets we've seen in like the 60s, right? Or the 70s. And so, I'm oversimplifying it, but we think about a lot of stuff that's happening. Like, oh, by the way, didn't Instagram steal stories from Snap, and then now everyone stole stories?
Yep.
So there's a lot of pressure to have to be quote unquote original. But if you add 10 to 20% of your flavor to something, it becomes original.
Hi, friends. Welcome to the Sales Enablement Podcast. I'm your host, Andy Paul. Now, that was Eric Siu. Eric's the CEO of ClickFlow and Single Grain, and he's the author of a new book titled Leveling Up: How to Master the Game of Life. Now, Eric has written an interesting book about applying the lessons he learned in becoming a top gamer to his personal and professional development, and takes the lessons from that and shares them with the audience. As Eric writes in his book, even though most people think gaming is a waste of time, he found that it shaped his mindset and taught him how to think critically. So in our conversation today, we dive into why Eric believes it's important to think of yourself as a perpetual newbie in whatever you're doing, in order so you don't have these preconceived biases or any sense of entitlement that prevents you from taking the risks you need to reach your goals and reach your potential. And we dig into various power-ups, just like in games, that Eric believes can lift you to the next level of performance. So all this and much, much more. But before we get to Eric, I want to remind you to subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to it. And if you subscribe, we'd certainly appreciate it if you could also give us your feedback about how we're doing in the form of a review. So thank you. All right, let's jump into it. Eric, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me, Andy.
Yeah, it's been a while since we spoke. You were on like our earlier iteration of our program before we rebranded or acquired and rebranded, let's say.
A lot has changed, huh?
Yeah. Well, I didn't anticipate we were going to have the opportunity to sell the podcast last year and did a big rebranding and yeah, it's been great. Yeah, just continue to build the audience for this content. And as we were talking before we started recording, we share a publisher for our books. So urge people to read Eric's book that we'll get into here in the show. So it's interesting reading the book Leveling Up that sort of interesting premises is you sort of found purpose as a gamer, and that's informed a lot of how you've built your businesses and developed in life.
Yeah, I mean, it's I spent a good chunk of my life playing games, and I just see life as a game. It's way easier to see it as a puzzle. It's more fun that way, and just looking at it from a game that never ends perspective, and just treating it as a journey, just trying to level up 1% every single day. There's a lot more fulfillment in that versus trying to stress out over every little thing.
Yeah, I mean, interesting. In the book, you wrote that you found your purpose at age 13, which it seems awfully young for people these days. So explain how that happened.
I wouldn't say I found my purpose at age. Maybe it felt like I did, but it was. I think it was an aha moment for me when I realized at age 13 that all I had to do was just find something in quote unquote real life that felt like a game, and then I would just be obsessed over it. Little did I know, it would just the ultimate game is business, and I feel like every single day I'm playing a game, whether it's recording a podcast with you right now, hanging out on Clubhouse with other people, acquiring a business, or recruiting amazing people. That there's so many different games I can play within business, which is at the end of the day, business is just working with other people, right? It is actually to me it's life. So,
but do you view it as a competition?
Oh, I think absolutely. I'm very, my strengths finder in my top 5, my number 3 top trait is competition or competitive. So I do see it as a competition, but that's just to keep my competitive juices going. It's fun to think that way, but I do not think it's a zero-sum game. I think, right. the pie in life just will continue to expand. I don't think it has to be, someone needs to be eliminated. Just like, in the gaming world, somebody does have to lose. In football, someone does have to lose. Same thing with basketball. I don't think life or business has to be that way.
So what were your first 2 strengths above competition on your strengths finder?
That's a good question. I think one is achiever, and I think the second one is focus.
Interesting. Okay. And you talk about that in the book. So yeah, I like sort of the metaphor you use of the power-ups as a way to level up in life as because it's a life lesson, not just a business lesson. And you talk about education, food, love, competition. And I love the idea, too, that you use competition as a power-up. So dig into those. Why were those the 4 for you?
The 4, I'm not sure if I listed competition as a power-up, to be honest.
You did, actually. That's the note I took as I was reading the book.
Yeah, so I'm 99.99% sure it's not a chapter in there, but I do think competition is great because the way I look at it, it's fuel at the end of the day. So whether it's someone, let's say someone says something bad about you, your company, your software, someone says something bad about you, maybe because they just don't like you, and I used to get really flustered and upset when I was younger, and I kind of developed a big chip on my shoulder. But then I realized a little later that when I reframe these scenarios as when people talk crap or people say something bad, I'm just like, oh, this is great, this is fuel. And so when I reframe it as, oh, this is something positive long term, then I actually want more of it. So I enjoy when people give me constructive feedback, or even when people are talking crap, right? So that in itself is kind of a mental jujitsu that you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I identify with that. I was told in my first sales training class out of college, my first job, I'd been on the job for like 2 weeks. We get sent away to a training class, big computer company, and yeah, the course instructor sent the evaluation back to my boss that they should probably get rid of me because I was never going to make it in sales because I was too analytical and thus was doomed to failure. And yeah, I don't want to say that I think about it every day, but it does come to mind quite frequently because certainly I've encountered those situations, as we all do, from time to time. Yeah, I love when you're talking about reading. There was one part that really stood out to me because I think this is something that is the statistics that younger generations aren't, the younger generation's workforce aren't reading as much as before. And you'd quote the Warren Buffett, read 500 pages, stack of books, read 500 pages like this. I think it was every week. How often do you read, and how much do you read? And what's the importance been for you in terms of leveling up your performance?
So, I mean, fundamentally, if you're to strip me down, take the businesses, take all that stuff away, I'm just fundamentally a learner and a learner teacher. I love teaching because it articulates my thoughts. And so I read a lot. I mean, right now I'm in Miami, but once I get back to LA, I have a reading habit. Usually I start at 8 p.m. or so, and I try to go for up to an hour. So it's reading a physical book. I actually don't really count articles I'm reading online. They do count, right. But I'm like, I need to touch something physical, right? Because it forces me to focus. So I do read.
So just to stop there, do you actually need to read the physical book, or can you read a digital book?
I used to have a Kindle. I realized I can't do digital because it just, I don't know. I just couldn't really get into it. I love the fact that, I have a physical book and I'm just like, stuck with it. Right. I think I've maybe read one book on my Kindle. So I just go old fashioned with it. I don't know why, but maybe because I try to. Yeah, maybe because, you look at, if you watched Inside Bill Gates' Mind on, I forgot what it's called, but Inside Bill's Mind on Netflix, he's always carrying like a satchel of books, right? And so anyway, my point is, I mean, I do read pretty often, and to me, it's being able to, let's say I'm reading a biography, I'm getting to learn from someone else's experiences for $10, $20, maybe $30 or so. And that to me is such a good deal. And so I'm constantly feeding myself. I think your information diet matters quite a bit, and it is how you're programmed. It does affect your worldview. So I do try to read from people that have, achieved the success that I want to get to, right? So whether I'm reading, Warren Buffett biographies or, Elon, all the names that you heard of, or just, listening to people that are great philosophers or kind of reading about what they're talking about, like let's say Marcus Aurelius as an example, right?
Right. Yeah. You talk about Stoicism in your book. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, so it's if you don't watch your health, if you don't work out, then you're going to be in trouble. If you're not working out your brain constantly, I think you're going to be in trouble as well. I mean, but that's just my perspective.
So if you had to look at your information diet and sort of divvy it up between books, podcasts, articles, I mean, how would that look?
Yeah. So podcasts, if I were to divvy it out into like an average day, podcasts might be, let's call it 30 to 45 minutes. Books, on average, maybe 30 to 45 minutes as well. And then when it comes to reading digital stuff, maybe let's say I average about 30 minutes or so. So I'm not at Warren Buffett's level where he's reading 5 hours plus per day, right? I still have stuff to operate, and at a certain point, maybe I can just focus on that and doing deals, which might be the highest leverage thing that I can do. But Warren Buffett, he's had to go through his levels. I'm going through my levels right now, and I think that's what the mix looks like right now.
Well, let me ask a question, because this is, I think, a hard thing oftentimes for younger people is what are you giving up in order to read?
Yeah, so right now, so I'm happy to say I'm 34 right now, right? And I'm not so much interested in partying. I'm not interested in, I think partying takes a ton of time. I'm actually not that interested in playing games as much anymore, because I do feel like I'm very much playing a game in real life. So giving up TV, games, partying, and trading into negative habits for positive habits, that's been good. Because even though I talk about games in the book, I think very much you're training in a virtual world. You have to learn as much as you can in the virtual world, but you have to bring that back to real life. If you spend too much time overtraining, let's say in sports, you can tear an ACL or tear a muscle. You can do the same thing in the world of gaming too. Like I have overtrained quite a bit back when I used to play. So sort of following that thought though about, and I think this is another thing that we see oftentimes people talk about online and so on, but is how do you choose, or how would you give guidance to someone who's getting into this habit of reading, consuming information, building their information diet? How do you help them choose who to follow, who to read? Yeah, I mean, I can only speak from my experience, and this is known as the whole Gestalt protocol thing, meaning I share my experience, right? You decide what you want to do with it. For me, I think let's use Naval Ravikant as an example. So, he's a billionaire. He's whatever he writes tends to be very philosophical. And then, you can see he's very thoughtful about the way he talks, these questions, things like that. So, I find him to be fascinating. He's kind of a, modern day, kind of a philosopher or stoic, right? In a sense. I do like listening to conversations. Tim Ferriss will often bring some amazing people onto the podcast. A couple weeks ago, he had the founder of Ethereum on there. And so I just like to hear different perspectives. So now in terms of answering your question directly, who can you follow that has strong philosophies that you can identify with, right? Who's doing something that you'd like to mirror, right? Like, let's say, again, if you want to be an amazing investor, go look at Warren Buffett, go look at Charlie Munger, right? Let's say you want to look at who's doing amazing stuff in the world of SaaS. Maybe you follow a Jason Lemkin, maybe you follow Mark Benioff, right? And so it just depends on what you're trying to do. Who's performing at the highest level, and those are the people that I want to go out there and follow. And then what I try to do is I try to mirror them in a sense, right? And I try to maybe apply a good chunk of maybe 10 to 20% of what they're doing into my life, and then I have my own little kind of remix, and that's what makes me.
Yeah, well, I was going to get to that point, because I think you talk about, you read the Stoics, Aurelius, and others. So you have to have a philosophy, I believe. It's not just enough to have a method. You need to have some principles and philosophies that inform what you do. Yeah,
totally. And so, my personal philosophies, I kind of talked about a little earlier with the book, is just like, you're leveling up 1% better every single day, and then you're playing the game of life. And then when you die, like, that's it, right? But you enjoy the journey every single day. And, it's part of what I talk about power-ups, that is a philosophy as well, but power-ups to me are not only good habits, but we're talking about mental models as well. So if I'm going to do something, if I'm going to take an action, I'm going to be on this podcast, what are the second order consequences? What are the third order consequences, right? So I'm trying to continually build a kind of I'm trying to stack positive power-ups instead of saying, I'm going out there, I'm drinking, I'm not sleeping enough, that type of stuff, right? I'm trying to stack as many positive buffs as I can. So when I start in a day, like in my daily routine, all the cliches you hear around meditation, working out, right, journaling, all that stuff. By the time my day actually starts and I start doing work, I've already stacked 9 different power-ups, 9 different buffs, right? And then my day ends, I go to sleep. And I'm tracking my sleep and all that different stuff. And I'm basically like a machine, right? But I enjoy it that way, right? That's just what works for me.
Are you quantifying all that stuff? I mean, you said you track sleep, track exercise, track diet. I mean, when you have that data, what are you doing with it?
So when I'm back home, I have a continuous glucose monitor called Levels, and then Levels will track when my glucose is spiking whenever I eat food, because your body and my body, it's different, right? So let's say broccoli might be good for you, and I'm generalizing right here, but broccoli actually might be bad for me. So if I eat broccoli and my glucose spikes, I'll know not to eat it that much. And so I know now the foods to avoid because I can see it on a chart. That's one thing. I can talk about I spend a good chunk of money on sleep optimization too. So, when I go to bed, my cover over my bed will cool the bed, but it'll also measure my sleep and it'll score me every night. And that wore an Aura ring.
Wait. Okay, I need to hear about this. So what's this cover?
Yeah. So this is called 8 Sleep. So it's number 8sleep.com. And, you can stack, I have a nice mattress, right? Obviously you have to spend good money on a mattress. So I stack it over that. And, there's a bunch of other stuff that I buy. I'm happy to talk about that. But then I stack that with my Aura ring, which tells me, how much REM sleep I'm getting, how much deep sleep I'm getting. And then that actually guides me. If you're asking about an action, I actually sleep with tape on my mouth now. And adding the tape to my mouth actually gives me about 30 minutes more of REM sleep per night, because I don't need to wake up to drink water. I don't need to wake up to use the restroom, because I'm not getting as dehydrated anymore. Because when you're using your mouth to breathe, it's not the most efficient thing to do.
Okay, so you're taping your mouth closed?
Yeah. If you just go to Amazon and type in sleep tape, you'll find stuff. So.
Interesting. Now, I haven't heard of this taping the mouth closed before.
It helps a lot. I didn't realize it looks ridiculous, but it helps.
And if you have a mustache?
I think it would be, I was just looking at your mustache. I was like, I think it would be harder for Andy.
All right, I am checking it out though. Along with 8 Sleep, because the biggest obstacle for me sleeping is I sleep hot, right? And my wife is got every blanket in the world piled on top of her. I'm next just with a sheet.
So the beautiful thing about the 8 Sleep, by the way, is there's regions for it. You can have one region that's hot, one region that's cold.
All right. Oh, this could be revolutionary. This could be great.
There you go. That's what I try to do on these podcasts.
Yeah, I know. No, I love that. Sleep tape. Yeah, I'll have to look at that. I'm not sure that's with my mustache, that's going to be as good as a deal as as that. Interesting. I hadn't heard that. And so, how are you tracking? How are you keeping a database of all this? I mean, I use from time to time a Whoop bracelet and track stuff with that. But
I mean, so for me, I mean, during the pandemic, it was pretty easy to track everything because I just hop on my Peloton bike and I track my meditation through let's say Calm or Headspace.
Yeah,
those are very quantifiable, and the sleep is very quantifiable as well. And then even I have a thing that grades my air quality in my place too on a scale of 1 to 100. So I track the air quality as well. So it's pretty neurotic, but hey, it works for me.
Well, but I think that's the thing is, so you have to find what works for you and the things that are important. And then, so we didn't really talk about exercise per se. You say you got on your Peloton. Is that what you primarily use for your exercise and your workouts, or?
Yeah, I mean, in the morning it's like a quick body workout, and then Peloton could be typically they're 30, 45-minute rides. Sometimes if it's like the weekend, I might go for like a 90-minute ride. So yeah. Who's
your instructor you follow?
I actually like Ben Aldis, and I like his girlfriend, Leanne Hainsby. And Olivia Amato. She's she's hardcore, so I like her.
Yeah, my wife likes Olivia. I'm a Matt Wilpers guy. So.
I love Matt Wilpers. I love his Power Zone rides. So yeah.
Yeah, 60-minute Power Zone ride on a weekend. That's a great workout. Okay, so I don't get too sidetracked on that, but I think it's your whole book's about performance improvement, and so often we don't look at it from a holistic standpoint for the whole person. There's a guy who's been on the show, a friend, Brandon Fluharty, who's starting a business called The Quantified Self, which is really sort of focused on this thing. Is how do you, if you're trying to up-level your performance, in his case, he's one of the top SaaS salespeople around, is you can't just look at your skills, you just can't look at your interpersonal skills and habits, it's the whole thing. And you should consider the whole thing. I think you're sort of at a forefront of movement, but I think it's one that will take hold on a broader scale. So one thing you talk about in the book is one of your level ups is alchemy, which, and you have a quote in there. You say, "I've always said that everyone is in sales. Maybe you don't hold the title of salesperson, but if you're in a business that requires you to deal with people, you are in sales," which is sort of the Dan Pink thing is, 3/4 of people have the responsibility to influence others or work through others in order to get their job done. Tell us what your experience. You said you sort of went through this experience of learning about this because you said you sort of started with sort of a brute force approach oftentimes.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of been my story growing up. It's throw spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks, and then just continue to throw my head against it, and eventually you break through. So in the book I talk about how alchemy is really sales and marketing, right? I think people that are marketers like, I'm not in sales, right? And people are sales like, I'm not in marketing. But at the end of the day, we're selling ourselves every single day, right?
Yes.
So I think those that aren't getting what they want, they likely haven't done a good job of selling, right? So they have to improve their skills on that side. And so again, I think the easiest way to understand this is that marketing is bringing people to the point of sale. Sale is closing them, right? You have to have both. It's not one or the other. And I think, when we talk about, to me, like it's sales is something that can be trained up, right? And I think that I used to think, I have to make all these cold calls. I have to, try all these different tactics. I would learn all these little tactics, but I didn't have a strategy. And then I realized later that for me, being a learner teacher, I just have to. What's worked well for me is just learning and then teaching in public, and then the audience builds. And then when people come to me, the sales cycle is a lot shorter. The lifetime value of the customer is way higher, right? And then I can build an outbound team around it, and then I can combine the two. And then I have this, this sales machine. And by the way, great book on this, The Ultimate Sales Machine, right? And then I can layer on all these other concepts, which to me are little power-ups, right? The whole Dream 100 stuff, right? You can look. There's a lot of great books out there. Founding Sales. There's Sales Acceleration Machine. All these great books, but again, you have to figure out what your personality is and what little tactics and strategies make sense for you, right, as a person. So every little bit, like we're all programmed differently. We just got to find out the other programs that align with who we are. So I'm kind of thinking of myself as like a computer. So
yeah. Well, I think the thing that we're seeing those, and this is an interesting point you bring up, is that in certainly a trend over the last 5-10 years in sales has been, how do we sort of standardize this buyer's experience? How do we make people, maybe how we take some of the autonomy away from people in order to develop these unique habits so they comply with the process? But I think we've already seen the backlash to that, where people are saying, well, no, it's to your point precisely. It starts with, how do I connect with this person? As you did, you talk about, you teach, you give, you build that connection. And once you've done that, then helping people solve their problems and get them across the finish line becomes that much easier.
Well, there's the book Influence by Robert Cialdini, right? And the one thing I remember from that book really well is that if you do something for someone else, by default, human behavior is they feel like they owe you, right? So if you just focus on giving first, reciprocity, it's just way easier. So give to get, right? Yep. And probably, the whole jab, right hook thing from Gary Vee. Sorry to cut you off, but for every 4 gives, or maybe every maybe 8 gives, maybe you have 1 ask, right? So there's a ratio behind it if you think in those terms. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, I think everybody has to learn and be very conscious about what their ratio is, right? Because it's going to be different for everybody. And for you, it might be 4. For Gary Vee, it might be 4. For other people, it may be 8. But you can't just go through life not thinking about these things. And I think it ties a little bit to this idea of your belief in stoicism, because I think that's. Oops, sorry, I had my phone turned off. Bound to happen once every 200 episodes. So tell us how you got into stoicism, because I've done a fair amount of reading in it as well, and align myself somewhat to some of those principles. Yeah,
I think the one thing that sticks out to me is, look, the one thing you can control is your emotions. Like a lot of virtually like 99% of the things out there you cannot control, but you can control the actions that you're taking, how you're reacting to certain things, right? If you react poorly, I used to I remember when I used to play a lot of poker, maybe when I was 18, 19 years old. in the very beginning, I couldn't control my emotions. I would, lose, get frustrated, or go on tilt, and I'd lose everything, and I'd be upset, and I'd go through this downward spiral. And that very much is real life. If you cannot control your emotions, your operating system, you're gonna overheat and get in trouble. That has stuck with me. And then if you think about Marcus Aurelius, who's the emperor of he had regions, right? He had to worry about people invading, the barbarians coming, and at the end of the day, he's just like, dude, I'm just going to worry about what I can control, and let the chips fall where they may. And there's also another book called The Inner Game of Tennis, and it is about tennis, but it is very much. It seems like you read it, but it's like life, right?
Yeah,
and it's like.
Yeah, Timothy Galway. We also had one of his people who wrote the book The Inner Game of Sales based on his teachings was on the show too. So yeah.
Nothing's too bad. Nothing's bad. Nothing's good. It is what it is. So what are you going to do about it? Yeah.
I agree 100%. I mean, I think that I remember reading somebody saying that we can't, maybe a different spin on what you said is we can't control the fact that we feel emotions. What we can control is how we react when we feel those emotions. And yeah, it's part of emotional intelligence and emotion control when you're in business. It becomes very important that you be able to do that. And I suspect probably, as you said, a problem when you're trying to play professional poker if you can't control your emotions.
Poker actually it's a forcing function because you get beat down so much in poker, and the variance really catches up to you. The math, it doesn't matter how good you are, you're going to have months where you lose 3, 6, 12 months at a time. It teaches you to stay calm, and that's why I think everyone should learn how to play poker. You should get some type of bankroll and go through the pain, because this is what real life is.
Interesting. So besides the risk factor and so on, I think there's another lesson though in poker too, which is that I think people tend to think about poker just being purely a game of chance, and they use it as a metaphor for sales, when actually I think poker's really a game of skill, and what you're trying to do is in each hand is you're trying to increase your probability of winning, which to me seems like the objective, certainly when I'm in sales and selling to someone, is every time I interact with them, I'm trying to increase my odds of winning.
Poker it's risk management, and it's I think it's important it forces you to think like an investor. So how you think in bets, when you should bet big, and then knowing kind of where you stand at the moment, knowing how to play the people around you, and also knowing when to not overextend yourself in terms of bankroll management. And so you see some of the best venture capitalists in the world, Jason Calacanis, David Sachs, Chamath Palihapitiya, they play together, and I've seen they'll play on TV together too, right? But it's great in terms of training your mind to not overreact, and to think in bets, and to just also think long term as well.
And so you got into poker as a result of your interest in gaming, right?
It was, all of my friends in high school, we played a lot of games, and the senior year of high school, this is the year after Chris Moneymaker won. So you have amateur winning. So the poker boom happened, and I was 17 years old, and, I got demolished by my friends. So naturally, having a chip on my shoulder, I have to demolish them. So, that's competitive juices kept me going. And then, after they stopped wanting to play with me, we stopped playing basically, because I kept taking everyone's money. Then that's when I quote unquote graduated to casinos, and then mostly played online.
And so what was the biggest pot you won, or the biggest tournament you won?
I can tell you one of the biggest pots I lost. But biggest tournament I won. Biggest tournament I won was probably for 25 grand. So it wasn't one of those million ones. And then the most I'd ever won in one sitting, bear in mind this is 19 or 20 years old, was probably around 10 grand.
And were these actually in person, or were these online?
The tournament was online. In person, tournament was online. In person was cash. The 10 grand.
Cash. Yeah. So in Vegas or someplace like that. Yeah, I've played it casually, but I never did it seriously. But I can see your perspective on that. Because at the end of the day, if you're in sales, and this is a sales audience, is really from the buyer's perspective. The buyer is saying a significant percentage of their purchase decisions based on how they mitigate the risk.
Yep.
And if you don't have a sense of that, again, every interaction you have with them, and understanding how they their risk profile and how they evaluate risk, then it's hard to help them.
Well, to your point, Andy, I mean, you're playing them. You're trying to think about, okay, what's their mindset right now? How can I make them look good? And also, like, what's their risk on this as well, right? What's their risk tolerance? So, poker gets you to think in terms of, like, puts you into the perspective of the other person.
So have you stopped, or do you still play?
I don't play. No, I don't. I can't play any games anymore. The only, it's just I keep thinking about business every time, so I can't.
I mean, do you find that some of the same behaviors though that you had? I mean, I know some gamers. I had a guy that worked for me. He was a very talented salesperson, but he was staying up every night, 5 nights a week, gaming, and eventually wore himself out, and wasn't able to do both. And I was wondering, do you find yourself sort of tempted to sort of some of those same behaviors but applied to business?
Yeah, no, not really, because I mean, when I'm awake, it's I sleep typically during normal times. So right now, traveling right now, but when I'm sleeping at 9:30, 10 p.m. and I'm getting up around let's say 5:30, 6 a.m. And but to me, that's a power up, right? So again, like I've reframed it as like, how can I get more of these? How can I get more of these, right? And I realized that, like, I used to stay up till 2, 3, 4, sometimes even 6 a.m. playing poker or playing games. I knew how that felt. And I knew eating at those times, like, it was really unhealthy. I barely slept.
Right.
So these are all negative power ups. So I try to just keep thinking in those perspectives. And that helps me a lot.
So one of the things you don't really address in the book is relationships. I mean, so yeah, we take a holistic look at this thing and relationships. How does that sort of factor in for you?
Yeah, I mean, I would just preface this with saying that, there's only 15 power-ups in the book, but in life, there's way more than that. I think it's really, it's an initial reframe for people. And so relationships are everything to me. I mean, I'm in a lot of these different networks, YPO, Entrepreneurs Organization, and I could just keep going down the list, right? Singularity University, TED, and all that. And so even here in Miami right now, like, I'm doing a dinner on Saturday. And so for me, I just like being able to create communities, and I know communities can stand a test of time. And I think it's a defensible moat, actually. And, we even have a group for the Marketing School podcast as well. And, relationships, I think the way I look at it, sometimes, initially, like, I was spending a lot of time on Clubhouse, and then my podcast co-host Niels was like, dude, you're wasting a lot of time. Like, and,
why do you think you're wasting time?
Well, he was like, dude, you should, like, what about all the other stuff with, like, business and all that? Like, he and it's a very valid point. Like, I was sacrificing a lot. My screen time was like 2 to 3 hours before. And then after Clubhouse, like, at my high point, it went up to 10 hours a day, which was like, it was getting unhealthy. Like, it actually started reminding me of my gaming days. But like, when we talked about this on the podcast, I was like, look, at the end of the day, if your net worth is your network, then it's everything. To me, it's global networking, right? Some of the most amazing people I've actually met in Clubhouse, and then we've started collaborations and talking and things like that. So to your point, I'm all about if I force myself to think in decades, then I continually reinvest into relationships right now. And to me, it's worth anything. Like, I'll spend for, like, if I have to spend 25, 30 grand or whatever, or even just like for these groups, I'll do it. And in the early days, I wasn't spending anything like that. I was putting together small little groups. Like, if I'm a salesperson right now, let's say I'm like a sales manager, maybe I'll get a group of 9 other sales managers, and we'll meet once a month, and we'll talk about, hey, here's what's working. Here's one thing I need help with. And I did that when I was about 25 or 26 years old. I had no resources, nothing. And it forces you into long-term thinking, and those relationships will all come back to you. Relationships are introductions are free to make, right? So I do it all the time.
So when you talk about this dinner you're doing in Miami, this is part of your building your network.
Yeah, I mean, I've been here I'm leaving this Sunday, so I'll be here for a month. But I did one dinner 2 weeks ago, and I had coffee with a bunch of other people, and then I'm doing another one this Saturday. And I pick up the bill and everything. I just, hey guys, let's just get together, and I connect everyone afterwards. And it's not hard to do, but the payoff is so big. So
right. Well, one of the last things and sort of aligned to that is I want to talk about focus. Actually, 2 things. I want to talk about focus, and I loved your power up about thievery as well. So focus, I think this is something that, and I love the way you phrase it. You talk about it's more a matter about what you say no to. And I imagine this is a challenge for you based on everything you have going on. So what sort of advice do you give to people about how to prioritize what you say no to?
Yeah. There's an answer, for when you have more resources. It's just to hire amazing people to run the different projects that you have going on, GMs or CEOs. Right. There's that. But for me, I think one thing that can be practical for everyone is I create a word of the year. My word of the year for 2021 is to harvest. So harvest means not taking on, it's like harvesting the crops I currently have right now. I'm not trying to take on other stuff right now. And to me, there's a lot of stuff going on, but the easiest way to look at what I do is it's a marketing holding company. So we have the software, we have the ad agency, the events business, and all this other stuff. So I just fundamentally focus on marketing businesses. So right now I'm looking at, the software company over here, or maybe buying the service business over here, but I have certain, let's call it investment criteria. Can I blow this up with my audiences? Is this a fit with marketing? Is this a 1 + 1 = 5 situation, right? So that's how I focus. And we're very protective about what we say yes to, because we just have too much going on right now. So
I like it. Word of the year. I have to think about that. Yeah. All right. Last thing is I love the power up about level up about thievery. You kept the quote from Picasso: "Good artists borrow, great artists steal." Tell us about that. Why that was so important to you?
That's my favorite chapter in the book, because there's cognitive dissonance, because people don't like to think of themselves as thieves. But at the end of the day, it's a stronger word, but we're all learning from each other. We're learning from each other here on this podcast, and maybe we're taking a little chunk and then we're injecting that into our worldview, right? And so to me, when I look at the rockets from SpaceX, they come back to Earth, which is a big accomplishment. But the fundamental design, the base design, still looks the same as like rockets we've seen in like the 60s, right, or the 70s. And so I'm oversimplifying it, but when we think about a lot of stuff that's happening, like, oh, by the way, didn't Instagram steal stories from Snap, and then now everyone stole stories, right? So I just think we don't need to. There's a lot of pressure to have to be quote unquote original, but if you just make something 10 to 20, if you add 10 to 20% of your flavor to something, it becomes original, and you just keep iterating. We're all iterating every single day. We're all leveling up 1%, and that's what it is. Every single thing you see, if your sales pitch sucks, okay, let's level up the sales pitch. Let's iterate on it. If the product sucks, let's do customer development. Let's talk to people, right? So we're constantly improving. Why does Warren Buffett read 5 hours a day? He's iterating. He's constantly adjusting his worldview based on new data that's coming. So that's why I see us as computers. We're just ingesting stuff and we're adjusting, and then we're just make sure we got to perform at a high level and play the game. And then when we die, we die. That's it.
Yeah, and I think the thing I'd add to that, though, is just is be conscious about it, right? Is be conscious about bringing new influences in and understanding what the impact they're having on you, as opposed to just being a robot and just bringing in. Because I think that's what separates humans from the machines, is this consciousness. And and I think that's, if you are conscious about what it influences, because to your point, we're all influences. Everything I write, I'm sure, is influenced by a number of sources that I've read in the past, or things that I've done that have been informed by things I read, and so on. And that's okay. That's how you move forward. And this is why it's so important, getting back to sort of the beginning of the conversation, is you have to have an information diet that supports that enables you to move forward.
100%.
Yeah. All right, Eric, it's been fantastic to talk with you. If people want to connect with you, how can they do that? Yeah,
they can go to levelingup.com, or they can just check out Amazon and pick it up there, or just reach out to me on Instagram or Twitter at EricOSIU. Yeah,
and do pick up the book, because first of all, it's a very well designed book, so it's a lot of fun to read. You've structured it sort of as in the game motif, which was great, and makes it for a quick read. So, Eric, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, friends, that's it for this episode. First of all, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen. As always, I'm so grateful for your support of this show. And I want to thank my guest, Eric Siu, for sharing his insights with us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to this podcast, Sales Enablement with Andy Paul, on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you could also leave us a rating or a review and let us know how we're doing, we'd certainly appreciate it. And you can do all that on your phone in less than a minute as soon as this episode is over. So thank you for your help. And as always, thank you so much for investing your time with me today. Until next time, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone.